knowledge carries weight, and it has always been so since the beginning of human existence. From the earliest days, when our ancestors learned how to make fire, to the digital age, where information flows faster than thought, knowledge has been the single most powerful force shaping destinies, civilizations, and the inner lives of individuals. To possess knowledge is not simply to hold facts in one's mind, it is to carry a responsibility to hold a force that can build or destroy, heal or harm, liberate or enslave. Unlike mere information, knowledge has depth, consequence, and gravity. It changes not just what you know, but who you are, and in doing so, it inevitably alters the way others see you and respond to you. The weight of knowledge becomes evident when you realize that every piece of it shifts the balance of power. A child who understands the dangers of fire is no longer innocent in the way he once was. He has been initiated into a reality that requires caution, discipline, and foresight. Similarly, an adult who uncovers the hidden motives of people around them is no longer free to act blindly, for what is seen cannot be unseen. Knowledge transforms innocence into awareness, and awareness into responsibility. Each discovery adds to the invisible load one must carry on the shoulders of consciousness. The more you know, the heavier the silence you must often bear, because not every truth is safe to speak aloud, and not every ear is ready to hear what you have uncovered. There is a reason why history remembers philosophers, prophets, and truth, tellers not only for their insights, but also for the burden they carried. They stood apart from their societies, bearing the weight of seeing what others could not or would not see. Knowledge isolates because to carry it means to step outside of comfort and illusion. The person who understands human manipulation, for instance, cannot return to the bliss of trust without suspicion. The one who has studied the cycles of history can no longer look at current events with naive eyes. This isolation is part of the heaviness of knowledge. It separates the knower from the crowd, often against their own will. The weight is also moral. Knowledge carries with it an unspoken obligation. Once you know, you are accountable. To know about suffering means you cannot claim ignorance as an excuse for inaction. To know the truth behind corruption means you cannot participate without betrayal of your own conscience. The more you learn, the more you are pressed to act, or at the very least, to wrestle with the tension of inaction. Many people turn away from deeper knowledge, not because they lack the intelligence to grasp it, but because they sense its weight and recoil from the responsibility it demands. It is easier to live unburdened by questions, blind to patterns, deaf to truths, than to accept the cost of carrying them consciously. Knowledge also shapes identity in irreversible ways. When someone acquires a certain kind of understanding, they are no longer the person they were before. This transformation can be uplifting or crushing. Consider the individual who learns the intricacies of human psychology. On one hand, they are empowered to empathize, to heal, to connect more deeply. On the other hand, they are haunted by the awareness of manipulation, repression, and shadow motives in every interaction. Knowledge alters perception, and perception alters experience, meaning that the knower lives in a world fundamentally different from the one inhabited by the ignorant. This is why knowledge is often symbolized as both a gift and a curse, a light that illuminates but also blinds with its intensity. The societal weight of knowledge is just as profound. Entire civilizations have risen or fallen based on who had access to knowledge and who did not. The invention of the printing press shattered centuries of centralized control because suddenly knowledge was no longer restricted to the elite. The same holds true today in the age of the internet, where access to information is simultaneously empowering and overwhelming. Societies struggle with the consequences because when knowledge becomes widespread, power structures are threatened, illusions are broken, and revolutions are born. Yet even here, not all knowledge is evenly distributed, and those who hold the deepest or most hidden truths often carry a dangerous burden. To expose certain knowledge is to invite retaliation. To remain silent is to endure isolation, and to misuse it is to bring harm upon countless others. On the personal level, knowledge often manifests as a quiet heaviness that others cannot see, but that the knower feels in every decision. The more someone understands about life, death, human nature, and the fragile constructions of society, the less frivolous their choices become. What seems simple to the unknowing becomes layered with consequence for the one who has seen behind the curtain. Even joy takes on a new dimension because the person carrying knowledge knows how rare, fragile, and fleeting it truly is. Love becomes deeper, yet more vulnerable. Freedom becomes precious, yet more precarious. Knowledge intensifies every experience, but it also weighs upon it, making even small actions feel like they ripple into eternity. The paradox is that knowledge is both liberation and burden. It frees the mind from ignorance, but it also chains the soul with responsibility. It can elevate an individual into wisdom, yet it can also isolate them into solitude. It grants vision, but vision is not always comforting. To know is to see, and to see is to carry, and to carry is to live under the invisible gravity of truths that cannot be set down. Silence is protection, and it has always been misunderstood in a world that worships noise, opinion, and constant expression. People are taught to believe that speaking up is always strength and that remaining quiet is always weakness. Yet silence has layers of power that few truly understand. To be silent is not to be voiceless. It is to choose deliberately not to reveal, not to expose, not to hand over pieces of yourself to ears that may misuse them. Silence shields the inner self from exploitation, misunderstanding, and unnecessary conflict, becoming both armor and sanctuary for the one who knows how to wield it. Silence protects by preserving mystery. Once words leave your mouth, they no longer belong to you. They become tools, weapons, or misunderstandings in the hands of others. In silence, however, you retain control. Others can only guess at your intentions, your depth, your motives. That guessing unsettles them, often giving you an advantage. Silence creates a veil, and veils protect what is sacred. It is no coincidence that many traditions throughout history associated wisdom with those who spoke rarely, carefully, and only when necessary. Their silence was not emptiness, but strength, a barrier against triviality and misuse. Protection through silence is also psychological. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every truth deserves to be announced. Not every wound deserves to be displayed. Silence protects the psyche from unnecessary exposure. When someone insults you, for example, your immediate reaction may be to defend, argue, or retaliate, but silence denies them the satisfaction of your reaction. Silence disarms manipulation, for manipulators thrive on your words, your explanations, your justifications. By withholding them, you cut off their fuel. What they cannot read, they cannot exploit. What they cannot provoke, they cannot control. In this sense, silence is not passive, It is active resistance, a quiet refusal to be pulled into the games of others. Silence is also a form of emotional protection. Words carry energy, and once spoken in anger or pain, they cannot be recalled. Relationships often collapse not from silence, but from words spoken recklessly, words that cut deeper than silence ever could. To choose silence in moments of rage or vulnerability is to protect not only yourself but also the bond you share with others. It gives space for clarity to return, for emotions to settle, for truth to be spoken at a time when it can be received. Silence protects love from being poisoned by words that, though temporary in intent, leave permanent scars in a larger sense. Silence is protection against the noise of the world. Modern society is drowning in voices, opinions, and endless chatter. To constantly engage is to lose yourself in that flood, to scatter your energy into countless meaningless interactions. Silence pulls you back, shields your focus, and restores your strength. It allows you to filter, to discern, to protect your mind from being colonized by the endless narratives and demands of others. Those who cannot sit in silence are often those most vulnerable to external influence because they cannot protect themselves from the pull of the crowd. But the one who embraces silence stands anchored, grounded, unshaken amidst the storm of noise. Silence also guards power. Think of leaders, strategists, and visionaries throughout history. Their greatest strength was not in how much they spoke, but in how little they revealed. They understood that silence kept their plans intact, their thoughts undisclosed, their intentions protected until the moment of action. Words spoken too soon invite sabotage. Silence shields the seed of vision until it has grown strong enough to face resistance. In this way, silence protects not only the present moment, but also the future, ensuring that possibilities are not strangled by premature exposure. On a more intimate level, silence protects the sacred spaces within. Every individual carries secrets, dreams, and inner wounds that form the essence of their being. To throw them carelessly into the open is to invite intrusion, mockery, or betrayal. Silence, instead, keeps these treasures guarded. It allows them to mature privately, to grow in strength without the contamination of external judgment. The greatest artists, thinkers, and spiritual seekers often protected their deepest processes with silence, revealing only the results when the time was right. In doing so, they shielded themselves from the weight of premature critique and the dilution of their vision. Silence even protects dignity. There are times when explaining yourself diminishes you, when defending yourself against slander only legitimizes it. By remaining silent, you refuse to play on the terms set by others. Silence signals self-possession, a refusal to be dragged into arenas unworthy of your presence. It is a shield that says, without words, that you know your worth and need not prove it through constant noise. This dignity often unsettles others, for they expect defense, reaction, justification, but receive only silence. That silence is not weakness, but a form of unshakable protection that no attack can pierce. In the end, silence is not emptiness but fullness. It is not the absence of power, but its concentration. It gathers your strength inward, shields it from erosion, and protects it until the right moment to release it. To understand silence as protection is to realize that words, once spoken, cannot be reclaimed, but silence can always be broken when the time is right. The unconscious fears exposure, for it is the hidden reservoir of thoughts, desires, and impulses that the conscious mind has either forgotten, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. Within it lie the raw truths about a person's fears, longings, and contradictions, truths that the ego works tirelessly to keep concealed in order to maintain a sense of order and identity. To expose the unconscious is to peel back the layers of illusion and confront what has been buried. And this confrontation is rarely welcomed. It unsettles, destabilizes, and threatens the carefully constructed self-image that a person presents to the world, and even to themselves. The unconscious is like a shadow that follows every step, yet remains unseen unless light is directed toward it. This shadow holds repressed anger, shameful desires, unprocessed traumas, and unresolved conflicts. People fear this exposure because it challenges the narrative they tell themselves about who they are. For example, someone who sees themselves as kind and selfless may have within their unconscious a hidden reservoir of envy, bitterness, or resentment. To have this exposed would not only shock others, but also tear apart the fragile illusion of selfhood that person has built. The unconscious resists exposure because it threatens the stability of identity and forces the individual to face the uncomfortable reality of complexity and contradiction. This fear of exposure is also social. Human beings depend on acceptance, belonging, and reputation. The unconscious holds thoughts and impulses that, if revealed, would endanger one's place within the group. Aggressive drives, taboo fantasies, selfish wishes, all of these, if brought into the open, risk judgment, rejection, or condemnation. Thus, the unconscious does everything in its power to remain hidden, because survival itself has historically depended on conformity. To belong, one must hide the unacceptable. This dynamic continues in modern life, where people craft public images and personalities that are socially digestible while bearing the raw truths of their psyche. Exposure threatens to dismantle this social mask, leaving the individual vulnerable to the scrutiny and rejection of others. On a deeper level, the unconscious fears exposure because it represents chaos breaking into order. The conscious mind is structured, logical, and linear. It creates stories, explanations, and systems to make sense of reality. The unconscious, on the other hand, is wild, irrational, and fragmented, a vast ocean of impulses and memories that defy neat categorization. If its surface is unchecked, the conscious mind can feel overwhelmed, drowned in a flood of images, emotions, and truths it cannot process. Dreams, slips of the tongue, or sudden emotional outbursts are glimpses of this surfacing, and even these small cracks often leave people unsettled. To fully expose the unconscious would be to shatter the fragile architecture of order that consciousness clings to for stability. This fear is also evident in resistance to self-reflection. Many avoid therapy, journaling, or even honest solitude because deep down they sense that these practices may unearth truths they would rather not face. The unconscious holds not only personal material, but also archetypal forces, collective patterns of humanity that confront an individual with aspects of existence they would prefer to deny. To expose these is to confront mortality, insignificance, and vulnerability. People resist because exposure forces them into confrontation with truths too heavy for comfort, truths that demand transformation rather than passive avoidance. Yet the unconscious continually presses for expression, even as it fears exposure. It reveals itself in symbols, in art, in dreams, in slips of behavior that betray hidden motives. A person may believe they are acting from conscious intention, but often the unconscious pulls the strings from behind the scenes. This is why people sabotage themselves, fall into repeated patterns, or feel drawn toward choices they cannot rationally explain. The unconscious resists being seen directly, but insists on influencing indirectly, shaping life through whispers and shadows. The fear of exposure arises because if these mechanisms are brought to light, the illusion of autonomy collapses, and the individual must admit that they are not fully in control of themselves. This dynamic is not limited to individuals. It plays out collectively as well. Societies, like people, have unconscious elements, histories of violence, exploitation, and injustice that are buried beneath narratives of progress and virtue. When these unconscious aspects are exposed, societies react with denial, outrage, or suppression, mirroring the individual's resistance. Collective unconscious fears exposure because it destabilizes the shared identity of the group, forcing it to reckon with the truths it has denied. Just as an individual resists therapy, societies resist historical accountability, clinging to illusions that protect their sense of coherence and superiority. The unconscious fears exposure, also because exposure demands responsibility. As long as something remains hidden, a person can disown it, project it onto others, or pretend it does not exist. But once it is brought into awareness, denial is no longer possible. The individual must confront their own capacity for cruelty, selfishness, jealousy, or weakness. They must also confront their untapped creativity, potential, and power, which can be just as frightening as their darker impulses. Responsibility weighs heavily, and the unconscious prefers to hide, to remain unexamined, so the ego can continue pretending to be lighter than it truly is ultimately. The unconscious fears exposure because it fears transformation. To bring hidden material into awareness is to invite change, to dissolve the old self and allow a new self to emerge. This process is rarely gentle. It requires loss, disillusionment, and the dismantling of illusions that have offered comfort for years. The unconscious clings to secrecy because secrecy protects the status quo, even if that status quo is suffering. To expose it is to unleash forces that demand growth, and growth is always painful before it is liberating. Truth has timing, and to ignore this is to misunderstand the very nature of how truth works in human lives. Truth is not only about accuracy or honesty, it is also about delivery, context, and readiness. A truth spoken at the wrong moment can wound rather than heal, divide rather than unite, destroy rather than enlighten. Just as a seed planted in winter cannot grow, no matter how fertile the soil, a truth revealed too early or too late fails to bear the fruit it might have produced if given in its proper season. Timing is the hidden dimension that determines whether truth becomes wisdom or a weapon. Consider the personal level first. In relationships, truth can either strengthen or shatter depending on when it is spoken. To tell a loved one a difficult truth while they are overwhelmed, grieving, or vulnerable may crush them beyond repair. Yet to wait until they are stronger, more open, or ready to hear can allow that same truth to guide them toward growth. The content of the truth does not change, but the timing does. This is why wisdom is not simply honesty, but discernment. It is the ability to sense when the soil is ready for the seed, when the heart is open to receive what the mind might otherwise reject. Truth also has timing in the sense that people themselves grow into the ability to handle it. What seems unbearable at one stage of life may become liberating at another. A child cannot comprehend truths about mortality, injustice, or betrayal in the same way an adult can. And even adults may not be ready for certain truths until they have lived enough to prepare them for it. This is why some truths seem invisible until suddenly, one day, they appear clear. It is not that the truth has changed, it is that the individual has reached the right time to see it. Timing here is not external but internal, rooted in maturity, readiness, and capacity on a broader scale. Societies also demonstrate that truth has timing. Throughout history, there have been visionaries who spoke truths long before their time, and they were often silenced, ridiculed, or destroyed for it. Their truths were not false, but society was not ready to receive them. Later, when the world had changed, those same truths became celebrated, even obvious. What was once heresy became common sense. This shows that truth cannot simply be imposed on an unwilling audience. It must meet the moment when conditions are ripe. Timing transforms what is dismissed as madness into what is recognized as wisdom. The fear of truth often stems not from its substance, but from its timing. To be confronted with a reality too soon can shatter illusions that are still necessary for survival. Illusions, however fragile, serve a purpose until a person or a group is strong enough to move beyond them. Just as a climber cannot leap to the highest peak without ascending the smaller ridges first, human beings cannot bear the heaviest truths until they have been prepared by smaller revelations along the way. To force the highest truth too early is not enlightenment, but cruelty. Thus, truth protects itself through timing, waiting until the hearer has been seasoned by experience enough to carry its weight. This does not mean that truth should always be withheld. There are times when withholding it becomes harm, when silence itself becomes a lie. The challenge is discerning the difference. To rush into disclosure without regard for readiness is to mistake bluntness for integrity. To delay indefinitely out of fear is to mistake cowardice for compassion. The wisdom lies in the balance, knowing when the unveiling of truth will serve life rather than fracture it. Timing is not passivity, but attentiveness, a listening to the rhythms of life and the readiness of the other truth has timing even within the individual psyche. Insights about oneself often come not when demanded, but when the unconscious decides the moment has arrived. Dreams, sudden realizations, or quiet moments of reflection may bring to the surface truths long buried. These truths had been waiting, hidden until the conscious mind was strong enough to accept them. To encounter them too soon might have caused collapse. To encounter them too late might have meant stagnation. Timing is the bridge between protection and transformation, ensuring that revelation does not destroy the one who receives it. This dynamic can also be seen in conflict. During arguments, people often feel the urge to hurl the harshest truths at one another, believing that honesty will cut through the tension. Yet truth spoken in anger often lands not as healing but as a weapon. Those words, though true, fall on deaf ears because the timing is wrong. Later, when emotions have cooled, that same truth, spoken gently, may finally be heard. Timing transforms truth from a blow into a bomb, from division into connection. The same sentence can destroy in one moment and heal in another, proving that timing is inseparable from truth's power, even in personal growth. Truth reveals itself in stages. No one is handed the entire weight of reality at once. Life gives truths piece by piece through experience, hardship, and reflection. Each moment delivers only what can be borne at that stage. The very fact that some truths become clear only in hindsight shows that truth is not a static object, but a living force that moves in alignment with time. What you could not see yesterday may become undeniable tomorrow, not because it was absent, but because you were finally aligned with it. To understand that truth has timing is to develop patience, restraint, and humility. It means recognizing that revelation cannot be forced, that people cannot be dragged into awareness before they are ready, and that even your own awakening unfolds according to a rhythm larger than your will. Timing is the hidden hand that ensures truth does not simply arrive, but arrives when it can transform rather than destroy. Power lies in restraint, a principle that runs counter to the way most people imagine strength. Many think of power as force, as domination, as the ability to act without hesitation or to impose one's will on others. Yet true power is not revealed in how much you can do, but in how much you choose not to do. It is the discipline to hold back when your impulses demand release, the wisdom to stay silent when your ego craves attention, the patience to wait when everything inside you urges immediate action. Restraint is the invisible thread that holds true strength together, for without it, power becomes recklessness, and recklessness inevitably leads to destruction. Restraint demonstrates mastery over the self. Anyone can lash out in anger, retaliate when insulted, or indulge when tempted, but it takes a deeper strength to pause, to breathe, and to choose differently. Power lies not in having no desire to strike, but in feeling the surge of that desire and refusing to let it dictate your actions. A warrior who cannot control his rage becomes a danger to himself and his allies. A leader who cannot restrain their impulses loses the trust of their people. A thinker who speaks without discernment undermines their own wisdom. In every domain, restraint is the force that transforms raw potential into refined power. Restraint also protects dignity. In moments of provocation, the urge to respond instantly is strong, but often the one who remains calm gains the upper hand. Silence in the face of insult unsettles the aggressor, because it denies them the satisfaction of reaction. Measured words in the face of chaos carry more weight than endless shouting. By holding back, you communicate that your worth is not determined by others' attempts to rattle you. Restraint becomes a shield that no insult can penetrate, a way of maintaining control over your own narrative rather than allowing others to write it for you. In relationships, power lies in restraint because love and trust are fragile. Words spoken in haste or actions taken in anger can damage bonds beyond repair. The ability to restrain one's tongue, to pause before unleashing the sharp truth or the cutting remark, can save what might otherwise be lost forever. Restraint allows space for empathy, for patience, for understanding to take root. It transforms conflict into dialogue, giving relationships the chance to deepen rather than collapse. To exercise restraint here is not weakness, but devotion, the recognition that sometimes the highest form of strength is choosing peace over victory. On a larger scale, restraint is the hallmark of wise leadership. History is filled with examples of leaders who unleashed power without restraint and paid the price in ruin. Conquest without discipline collapses into tyranny, and ambition without restraint leads to downfall. In contrast, leaders who hold back, who calculate, who act only when the moment is right, preserve their strength and secure lasting influence. Restraint in leadership is the art of conserving power rather than expending it recklessly, of knowing that timing and precision are more powerful than constant display. The greatest rulers, generals, and visionaries understood that the choice not to act was often more decisive than the choice to act. Restraint is also the foundation of personal growth. To delay gratification, to forego immediate pleasure for the sake of long-term goals requires immense strength. The student who restrains distractions in order to study, the athlete who restrains indulgence to train, the artist who restrains laziness to create, each demonstrates power in the form of discipline. This form of restraint is not about denying life's joys, but about channeling energy towards something higher. Without restraint, dreams remain fantasies. With it, they are given structure and the chance to manifest. Power grows through the discipline of withholding today in order to build tomorrow. In the realm of conflict, restraint reveals itself a strategy. The opponent who cannot control themselves is predictable, easily provoked, and ultimately self-defeating. The one who practices restraint, however, watches, waits, and strikes only when the time ensures victory. This is why restraint has always been central to martial traditions, where mastery is not measured by the ability to attack at every opportunity, but by the wisdom to act with precision, to fight only when necessary, to strike only when effective, to hold back until the decisive moment. This is the mark of true power. Restraint is not passivity, but control, a deliberate choice to conserve strength for when it matters most. Psychologically, restraint creates inner freedom. To act on every impulse is to be enslaved by desire, anger, or fear. Restraint, on the other hand, liberates because it places choice above compulsion. The individual who practices restraint no longer reacts automatically, but responds consciously. This conscious control builds confidence because it proves to the self that they are not ruled by chaos within, but guided by strength within. Restraint here becomes a source of unshakable stability, the foundation upon which self-respect and inner peace are built. Even in creativity, power lies in restraint. The artist who uses every color without discipline creates chaos, but the one who chooses carefully, holding back, produces harmony. The writer who pours out endless words without restraint loses clarity, but the one who edits, pares down, and refines produces beauty. Restraint channels raw expression into form, giving it impact and meaning. It is this principle that turns potential into art, noise into music, chaos into structure. Restraint does not limit creation, it gives it shape in every sphere of life. Restraint transforms power from something dangerous into something purposeful. It is the difference between fire that burns uncontrolled and fire that warms and illuminates. Power without restraint is fragility disguised as strength, but power with restraint is strength refined into mastery.